The company alleges it lost its contract after raising concerns about the safety of its poultry. It claims Popeyes bought meat from an unauthorized seller that allegedly stored and packaged raw chicken in residential garages.
45 pounds of meat embargoed by inspectors in a single visit at one of America's best-known sit-down chains. That is one chain on this list. There are 9 more, and most are worse. You think you know which ones? The fast food places, but the sit-down chains? You walk in for a real meal at a real price, trusting the place to do better than a drive-thru. Not in 2026. A federal judge just ruled customers can sue one of these chains over the meat that never shows up in the sandwich. Another chain's own CEO admitted she feels like she has been fired by America. A third was just sold to the private equity firm that bankrupted a different chain on this list. Health inspections, federal lawsuits, bankruptcy filings, earnings calls the executives wish you had not heard. We have the receipts. We count them down, worst at the top, and tell you which chains will cost you money and which will cost you a hospital trip. Watch for the hospital trip chains, the ones with inspectors condemning trays of meat, not just cutting portion sizes. Then, 3 places where the meat still earns the price you pay. No corporate sponsors, no restaurant paid to be on either list. Worst 10, Cracker Barrel. 6 live roaches behind the dish machine, 9 live flies in the food prep area, standing water on the kitchen floor. That is the inspection report that temporarily shut down a Cracker Barrel in Wesley Chapel, Florida in January 2025. Cracker Barrel, the chain selling you rocking chairs on the porch, wagon wheels on the wall, and biscuits like grandmother made them. That was not one bad location. The same month in Morrow, Georgia, Cracker Barrel failed inspection at 61 out of 100. Black mold-like growth on the ice machine. Steak, turkey, and chicken, sitting in the temperature danger zone. 8 months later in Crossville, Tennessee, inspectors pulled 45 pounds of meat off the line in a single visit. Raw steak, hamburger patties, country ham, all sitting up to 20 degrees above the safe holding temperature. An employee caught handling cooked bacon with bare hands. April 2026 in Brentwood, Tennessee, another failure. Meatloaf at 118 degrees on the steam wheel. 4 states, 5 failing inspections in 14 months. Pattern, not coincidence. So how does a chain that built its brand on grandmother's kitchen end up here? Look at what the company is spending its money on instead. In November 2025, Cracker Barrel's CEO told an interviewer she felt like she had been fired by America. Stock down 46%, the worst year since 1999. The CEO presiding over those failing kitchens makes more than $6.5 million a year, 360 times the median Cracker Barrel employee. Her solution to declining sales? A $700 million store remodel. New logo, new interiors, that customers hated so much the company had to cancel it. $700 million on rebranding while meat sits at 56 degrees in the cooler. Here is what that looks like on your plate, as Tennessee and Georgia diners keep describing it in Google reviews. The hamburger steak, a gray hockey puck under brown gravy that congeals as it sits. The country fried steak, breading that peels off in one wet sheet like wallpaper off a bathroom wall. You are not paying for grandmother's biscuits anymore. You are paying for the corporate logo Cracker Barrel had to take down because customers booed it off the wall. Before you go to any Cracker Barrel, pull up your county health department's inspection page on your phone. Search the address. If the last grade is under 80, drive past it. The next chain on this list closed 41 locations in 2024, while its 2 biggest rivals opened dozens. Why does a steakhouse start chopping off its own locations? Worst 9, Outback Steakhouse. Outback Steakhouse does not hand-cut its steaks on the premises, does not dry-age the beef, and uses the cheaper USDA choice grade, not prime. Those are the details real steakhouses obsess over. That is what Outback charges you steakhouse prices for skipping. In August 2025, Tasting Table ranked 11 major steakhouse chains in America on ribeye quality. Outback finished dead last. The dominant complaint across Yelp, Google, and TripAdvisor in every state is the same. You order medium rare, it comes out gray. You send it back, the replacement is gray. You cut into your $25 ribeye expecting that warm pink center. What lands on your plate is gray edge to edge, dry as a napkin. with the metallic taste meat picks up after sitting too long under a heat lamp. That is not bad luck. That is what the kitchen is built to produce. Texas Roadhouse hand cuts every steak in a 34-degree in-house cooler. Peter Luger dry ages its beef before it touches the grill. Outback does neither and charges you steakhouse prices. This is why Outback is closing while every steakhouse competitor is opening. In 2024, parent company Bloomin' Brands announced 41 closures, most of them Outback. The same year, Texas Roadhouse passed Olive Garden as the biggest casual dining chain in America by sales. You are not paying for the steakhouse experience. You are paying for the parking lot and the reservation. If you want a steak for $25, go to a butcher counter. Pick a choice ribeye. Salt it the night before. Sear it 4 minutes aside in a cast iron pan. You will eat better than every Outback in America served tonight. The next chain on this list is the one that invented the all-you-can-eat steakhouse and bankrupted itself twice trying to keep the lights on. Worst 8, Sizzler. 2 federal bankruptcies, 626 restaurants permanently closed, 90% of the chain gone. That is Sizzler, the company that called itself a steakhouse, loud enough that millions of Americans believed it for 40 years. Sizzler had over 700 locations at its peak in the 1990s, all-you-can-eat salad bar, steak and shrimp combo, a family of 4 under $50. By 2025, 74 locations remain. 6 states plus Puerto Rico. Sizzler filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy in 1996 to dump unprofitable leases. Filed again in September 2020. Both times, Sizzler blamed outside pressure, bad leases, the pandemic. Then the CEO told a different story. Chris Perkins on the Record to Restaurant business. Many of the company-owned restaurants were struggling well before COVID. So what was actually wrong with the food? Start with what Sizzler does not tell you. Texas Roadhouse, Outback, Longhorn. Every real steakhouse in America publishes the USDA grade of its beef. Choice, Prime. Sizzler's menus do not tell you what grade of beef you're cutting into. The chain that built its brand on the words steakhouse stays quiet on that one detail. What customers describe lines up with what the silence implies. Chowhound reports that TripAdvisor reviewers now use the phrase Sizzler quality steaks as an insult to other restaurants. The Takeout's review desk reports the same pattern across its national survey. Tough cuts, small portions, gone in 2 bites. You sink a steak knife into a Sizzler top sirloin, and the knife stops. You saw what pulls free is gray-edged, chewy, with the flavor of the salt and char crust the kitchen burned, trying to hide what was underneath. You are not paying for steakhouse beef. You are paying for the salad bar. If you want a real steak under $20, your local butcher will sell you a fresh-top sirloin and tell you the grade. 4 minutes aside in a cast iron pan. You will eat better than 2 federal bankruptcies worth of management decisions ever produced. The next chain on this list got named the worst steakhouse in America by professional food critics, and a federal class action followed. Worst 7, Logan's Roadhouse. Over 18,000 employees learned by email on March 31, 2020, that the company was shutting down, and their jobs and benefits were gone. That is what happens to a kitchen the day private equity decides the steakhouse cannot service its own debt. Welcome to Logan's Roadhouse. Bought, sold, or restructured 6 times in 24 years. Chowhound named Logan's the worst steakhouse chain in America. Tasting Table reviewed 13 steakhouse chains and ranked Logan's bottom of all 13. 2 named publications. Same conclusion. The why is on the ownership history. Cracker Barrel sold Logan's in 2006 to a private equity group for $486 million. Kelso and Company took it over in 2010 in a leveraged buyout of more than $500 million. Chapter 11, bankruptcy in 2016. Kraftworks Holdings bought it in 2018. Second Chapter 11 in 2020, sold out of bankruptcy for $93 million. Sold again in 2026 to the parent company of Cici's Pizza. A chain valued at more than $500 million in 2010, sold for $93 million 10 years later. Most of its value gone. Here is what that does to the meat. A private equity firm buys a chain by loading it with debt. The chain has to service that debt out of its own profits. And the easy lever is food cost. Cheaper beef? Smaller portions? pre-cooked instead of made to order. Every dollar saved on the plate goes to the lenders. When Kraftwerk's fired its 18,000 employees by email, the chain reopened months later under new ownership. The cooks who knew the stakes were gone. So was the training. What lands on your plate now reflects every one of those decisions. No crust, the center mushy and stringy at the same time, the wrong color for cooked beef. The marinade tastes like the bottle it came out of. A real steakhouse has chefs who have worked there for years. Logan's has a kitchen emptied by email and refilled at minimum wage. If a Logan's is on your dinner shortlist, pull up the address on your phone. If a Texas Roadhouse is within 15 miles, go there. The hand-cut steak in their 34-degree cooler costs the same and arrives the way it should. The next chain filed for bankruptcy with $376 million in debt, and the meat was never what the brand was selling. Worst 6, Hooters. Hooters never sold wings. Hooters sold an atmosphere, and the wings came along for the ride. For 42 years, the atmosphere paid the bills. In 2025, the atmosphere ran out of money. March 31st, 2025, Hooters of America filed Chapter 11 in the U.S. Bankruptcy Court for the Northern District of Texas. $376 million in debt. Debt service alone, $31 million a year. 48 company-owned locations had already closed in the 18 months before the filing. Sales down 31% since 2019. Where did the money go? Not into the kitchen. Same private equity story we just heard at Logan's. Nord Bay Capital and Tri-Artisan Capital Advisors bought Hooters in a leveraged transaction, loaded it with debt, and made the chain service those loans before it could buy a single chicken wing. When the wings have to subsidize the loan payments, the wings get cheaper, frozen instead of fresh, smaller, pre-breaded by a supplier instead of breaded in the kitchen. That is what lands on the plate. The dominant complaint pattern across Yelp, Google, and Trustpilot is the same in every state with a Hooters. The breading slides off the wing the second it leaves the basket. What is left chews like packing foam. The skin underneath is gray because the fryer never got hot enough. You came for the atmosphere. You stayed because the wings used to be good. Now the wings taste like the loan payment they paid for. Most Hooters horror stories are about stale fries and freezer-burned wings, not food poisoning. But when the fryer is underheated and the chicken is cheap, undercooking is not a risk older stomachs need. Here is what you will not hear anywhere else. On October 31st, 2025, the original founders, the men who opened the first Hooters in Clearwater, Florida in 1983, bought the company back out of bankruptcy. They watched private equity ruin their brand in 7 years and had to pay to take it back. If you want decent wings under $20, skip the chain. Find a local sports bar where the owner is in the building. Their reputation is the business, and the regulars stop coming the first time the wings come out gray. We are halfway. 5 chains still ahead. A fast food giant being sued in federal court over the meat that never makes it into the sandwich. The buffet chain so notorious that just driving past one is food safety advice. And the diner America used to count on at 3 in the morning. Now owned by the same private equity firm that just bankrupted a chain on this list. Subscribe to In Plain Bite and hit the bell. The investigations only get worse from here. Worst 5, Applebee's. FFFD. That is Applebee's grade history on the Chain Reaction Antibiotic Scorecard, published by a coalition that includes Consumer Reports, the Natural Resources Defense Council, and the Center for Food Safety. The overwhelming majority of the meat on your Applebee's plate is from cattle dosed with the same antibiotics doctors use to treat people. Welcome to the Neighborhood Bar and Grill, the chain whose largest Florida franchisee just left 14 of those neighborhoods without telling them goodbye. March 24th, 2026, Neighborhood Restaurant Partners Florida, one of the largest Applebee's franchisees, filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy. 53 locations across Florida, Georgia, and Alabama. 14 already closed before the petition. No announcement. 1 week the doors opened. The next week, they did not. The chief restructuring officer told the court the cause was inflationary pressure on the chain's core customer base. Fewer restaurant visits, lower average tickets. The franchisee was built on dependable older diners, then walked out on them. Now back to that antibiotic scorecard. 4 straight reporting cycles failing for sourcing beef from cattle dosed with medically important antibiotics. The chain moved up to a D in 2021 for one reason. It now sources 7% of its beef from suppliers who use antibiotics responsibly. 7%. In 2016, Applebee's spent $75 million installing wood-fired grills in 2,000 restaurants. The CEO called it the biggest culinary investment in the brand's history. Same-store sales fell 4.2% the next quarter. The chain closed 135 locations. Today, Applebee's is shedding the wood-fired grill program and going, in one franchisee's words to Marketplace, back to basics. The wood-fire promise is dead. The antibiotic grade is stuck at a D. A major franchisee is in bankruptcy. You cut into an Applebee's $11 sirloin, and the knife goes through too easily. No crust, no juice, a salty aftertaste that sits in your mouth for an hour. If you want an $11 sit-down meal, go to a Texas Roadhouse on a weekday before 6. The early dine special runs $8 to $12 and the steak is hand-cut on the premises. Same money, different category of meat. The next chain is the second largest burger company in America, and the only one that has earned a failing grade on the same antibiotic scorecard for every single year it has been published. Worst for Burger King. FFFF. That is Burger King's grade history on the Chain Reaction Antibiotic Scorecard, published by Consumer Reports, the Natural Resources Defense Council, and the Center for Food Safety. A failing grade in every single report. No commitment, no timeline, no plan. Welcome to the second largest burger chain in America, owned by Restaurant Brands International, a publicly traded corporation with billions in annual revenue. They have the buying power to set any beef sourcing standard in the country. They have chosen the lowest one available. The Whopper patty is frozen. Has been frozen since the company opened in 1954. A solid disc of ground beef trucked to your Burger King, stored in a walk-in freezer, dropped on a conveyor belt, run through the flame broiler. Wendy's serves fresh beef. In-N-Out serves fresh beef. Shake Shack, Culver's, Five Guys. Every major U.S. burger chain that built its reputation on the meat itself uses fresh beef. Burger King uses frozen. The chain leans on the flame-broiled image while serving patties that arrive frozen. Slide down a conveyor and meat aflame for 90 seconds. That is what the marketing calls grilling. That is what is in your Whopper. Antibiotic overuse in livestock breeds resistant bacteria. Those bacteria pass to humans through the meat. For older Americans more likely to need antibiotics to clear an infection, those resistant strains are a direct threat. When you actually need the medicine to work, it does not. The CDC estimates antibiotic-resistant infections kill more than 35,000 Americans every year. Burger King's response: nothing. Not a target. Not a commitment. Just F after F. 2013, DNA testing in Europe confirmed horse meat and beef shipped to Burger King through its supplier in Ireland, product that ended up on plates in the United Kingdom, Ireland, and Denmark. Burger King fired the supplier and apologized. The episode never reached U.S. restaurants, but it exposed the bet a frozen patty chain takes every day. When the meat is processed thousands of miles before it reaches the broiler, the chain only finds out what is in the patty after a regulator runs a DNA test. You bite into a Whopper, and the patty has a faint, waxy aftertaste, the rendered fat from a frozen patty congealing on your tongue. The texture crumbles, the way ground meat does after being frozen, thawed, and reheated. The juice on the wrapper is mostly grease. If you want a fast food burger that tastes like beef in 2026, the technology is not secret. Wendy's, In-N-Out, Shake Shack, Culver's. None charges more than Burger King for the equivalent burger. The next chain is the diner America used to count on at 3 in the morning. And the inspections show what those late-night kitchens are serving. Worst 3, Denny's. 75 out of 100. That is Denny's score on the American Customer Satisfaction Index, among the lowest scores of any full-service restaurant chain in America in 2025. Below the industry average for full-service chains, down from 2024, 5 straight quarters of declining same-store sales. Welcome to America's Diner, the chain customers used to count on at 3 in the morning. Vinyl booths, bottomless coffee. The diner is being closed. Roughly 1 in 10 Denny's locations is being shuttered by the end of 2025, 150 restaurants in total. 88 already closed in 2024, another 70 to 90 this year. That is who is leaving. Now here is who just bought what is left. In November 2025, Denny's announced it was being taken private in a $620 million buyout. The buyer group includes a private equity firm called Tri-Artisan Capital Advisors. You heard that name 2 segments ago. Tri-Artisan was one of the 2 private equity firms that loaded Hooters with $376 million in debt before the chain filed for bankruptcy in March 2025. Now they own Denny's. Same private equity playbook we documented at Logan's, Roadhouse, and Hooters. Buy with debt, service the debt out of the kitchen budget. The cooks who knew the recipes leave. The chain shrinks. The food on the plate is what those decisions look like in real time. Health inspections in 2025 caught Denny's locations holding chicken above the safe maximum and soup below it, temperatures where bacteria multiply fastest. The Denny's steak that lands on your table at 3 in the morning is thin enough to read a newspaper through. Grill marks stamped on, not seared in. Gray edge to edge with a watery juice that pools on the plate. That is not beef juice. That is what comes out of meat that sat in a warm cooler too long. If Denny's is still your 3 in the morning option, stick to eggs cooked to order. Skip the meat at off-peak hours when food sits longest. And if your county posts inspection scores online, check the address before you walk in. The next chain on this list is being sued in federal court, not for a kitchen failure, but for selling you the meat that never made it onto the sandwich. Worst 2, Arby's. According to a federal lawsuit, half the meat Arby's shows in the ad is not in the sandwich. September 2023, Joseph Alongas filed a class action against Arby's in federal court, alleging the company's advertising images depict roughly double the meat customers actually receive, half of what the photo shows. October 2025, a federal judge denied Arby's motion to dismiss. The court decided a jury should hear it. Most consumer lawsuits never clear that bar. This one did. We have the meats. 5 words. The slogan that built the entire chain. According to a federal court filing, half of those meats are missing from your sandwich. The Arby's roast beef in the commercial, piled to the top of the bun, just running down the wrapper. 3 inches of meat between bread that has to lean to contain it. The Arby's roast beef in the bag. 3 paper-thin slices you can hold up to the light and see through. That is not the worst part. The roast beef does not arrive at your local Arby's as a roast. It arrives as a frozen brick. We have covered this before. It bears repeating because it is what the meat in your sandwich actually is. Industry calls it a shaped beef product. Beef encased in a self-basting broth, sealed in a plastic bag and flash frozen. That bag arrives at every Arby's, a frozen brick of pinkish-gray beef suspended in gel. Former employees publicly describe it as looking like meatloaf when raw, tempered in the cooler a day, oven 3 to 4 hours, thin sliced, on your bun. That is the slogan. That is the product. We have the meats, shipped as a frozen self-basting loaf. The Food Animal Concerns Trust Scorecard graded Arby's beef on antibiotic use, F grade, among the lowest issued to any major chain. For older Americans more likely to need an antibiotic to work, that F is a direct threat to the medicine that keeps you alive. If you were craving a roast beef sandwich, the deli counter at any major supermarket sells a real beef roast, sliced thin to order, comparable price per ounce, no shaped loaf in the back. The chain at number 1 had inspectors document 10 separate risk factor violations in a single visit, including a walk-in cooler leaking onto food and ant spray stored next to the coffee creamer. Worst 1, Golden Corral. 10 separate risk factor violations documented in a single inspection at one Golden Corral location. That is on the public record at the Davenport, Iowa Golden Corral, April the 29th, 2025. Scott County health inspectors documented the visit. Mouse droppings in every cabinet under the hot holding and cold holding lines where food is stored before it reaches the buffet. The walk-in cooler compressor leaking onto food packages, flagged as a repeat violation. Dented and bulging cans of beans and green chiles on the kitchen shelves. Ant spray not approved for restaurant use stored next to the coffee creamer. Ventilation hoods, floors, and fryer cabinets coated in dust and grease. This is the chain that lands at number 1. If we are talking about it, it's because the pattern continued and is not stopping. February 19th, 2026, inspectors returned to the same Davenport location and pulled another round of food in the danger zone. Cheeseburgers at 129 degrees, deviled eggs at 58, raw chicken at 61. Same kitchen, same failures. You walk up to the carving station expecting roast beef. What is under the heat lamp is gray at the edges, dry through the middle with a film floating on the au jus. Touch it with your fork and it falls apart, not because it is tender, but because it has been sitting under heat so long, the texture is canned dog food. The cheeseburgers on the buffet line at 129 degrees taste warm-cool, the temperature where bacteria multiply fastest. This is the chain that built its reputation on serving older Americans on fixed incomes a predictable meal at a predictable price. Here is what the buffet model does to that promise. One contaminated tray feeds hundreds of people in a single evening. The same population most likely to eat at Golden Corral is the population most vulnerable to foodborne illness, weaker immune systems, slower recovery times. A bout of food poisoning at 68 is not the same event as one at 28. If you want a meat-centered meal, do not bet it on a buffet. You have the 10. Now here are 3 places where the meat still earns the price you pay. Safer option 1. Texas Roadhouse. Every Texas Roadhouse location has its own butcher, not a corporate title. An actual meat cutter who hand cuts every steak that location will serve that day. 700+ locations across America. Walk into any Texas Roadhouse and there is a glass case at the front of the restaurant with the day's steaks laid out, sirloins, ribeyes, fillets, and the butcher behind it. You pick the exact cut. They take it off the case and walk it to the grill. The steaks arrive at the restaurant fresh, never frozen, trimmed and cut on premises that morning. You bite into the result and the steak tastes like steak. Not freezer burn, not chemical marinade, not heat lamp gray. The crust is dark and seasoned. The interior holds the doneness you ordered. The fat has rendered into the meat. A hand-cut sirloin starts around $13. A ribeye around $27. Cheaper than half the chains on the worst list. And the meat is hand-cut by a person whose entire job is cutting it well. In 2024, Texas Roadhouse passed Olive Garden as the biggest casual dining chain in America by sales. Customers voted with their feet. The caveat: a small number of Texas Roadhouse locations have failed health inspections in the past 2 years. Out of 700, the failure rate is small, not zero. The chain is only as good as the location you walk into. Before you go, pull up your county health department's inspection page. Search the address. Read the last 2 reports. If your Texas Roadhouse is clean, that is your chain steak. If not, drive to the next one. The next safer option is the only fast food chain in America that has held the top customer satisfaction score in its category for over a decade running. Safer option 2. Chick-fil-A. Chick-fil-A has held the top spot, or close to it, on the American Customer Satisfaction Index Limited Service ranking for more than a decade running. More than 10 consecutive years at the top of the limited service category. That score measures the food customers actually receive. Every store cooks the chicken to the same standard. You unwrap the sandwich in Atlanta or Sacramento, and you get the same thing. Chicken hot, crispy outside, juicy inside, breading bonded to the meat. The pickle is real. The bun is fresh. The lemonade is squeezed in the store, not poured from a syrup bag. Now the honest part. Chick-fil-A is not perfect. In March 2024, the chain reversed its decade-old no antibiotics ever pledge, citing supply pressure, and switched to a softer standard called no antibiotics important to human medicine. Still better than the F-graded chains on the worst list, but it is not what they promised in 2014. Then, the ingredient list. The classic Chick-fil-A chicken sandwich runs to roughly 55 ingredients per a published audit by Food Babe, including MSG, sodium aluminum phosphate, and dimethylpolysaloxane, the anti-foaming agent also found in silly putty. Chick-fil-A's own published ingredient panel confirms all 3. A 55-ingredient sandwich is not what most older Americans grew up calling food. So why is this the safer option? Because the rest of the fast food chicken category is worse. Most major chicken chains use the same MSG, the same anti-foaming agents, the same sodium phosphates, and most carry failing antibiotic grades on top of it. Among imperfect options, Chick-fil-A is the chain whose food shows up consistently and whose remaining commitment is still ahead of the field. If you want fewer ingredients on the plate, the grilled chicken options at Chick-fil-A run far shorter than the fried sandwich. Same chain. Different decision at the counter. The third safer option is regional, but it has done something every fast food burger chain swore was impossible. Safer option 3, In-N-Out Burger. In-N-Out Burger does not have a single freezer or a single microwave in any of its restaurants, anywhere in the country. That is the rule. No freezers, no microwaves, nothing prepackaged, nothing reheated. The chain has operated this way since 1948. The beef is 100% USDA fresh ground chuck. Whole shoulder cuts arrive at one of 3 In-N-Out owned facilities: Baldwin Park and Lathrop in California, Dallas in Texas. The company's own butchers debone the chuck, grind the meat, and form the patties on the premises. Per the corporate ingredient panel, no fillers, no additives, no preservatives. Patties leave the facility on In-N-Out's own trucks and arrive at restaurants fresh, daily. The chain refuses to expand more than a day's trucking distance from a patty facility. That is why the easternmost In-N-Out sits in Tennessee. Now the bun. In-N-Out's buns are baked by Puritan Bakery, a family-run California operation that has been making bread since 1938. The buns are made with a sponge dough method. Flour, water, shortening, yeast, sugar, and salt. Fermented for 7 hours before baking. No preservatives, no dough conditioners. That detail matters because the rest of the fast food industry takes a different shortcut. Until 2014, the bread at major fast food chains contained azotocarbonamide, known as the yoga mat chemical, because it is the same compound used to make plastic foam in yoga mats and shoe soles. Banned in the European Union and Australia, the World Health Organization has flagged respiratory and allergy concerns. It took a viral petition with 90,000 signatures and a U.S. senator publicly demanding an FDA ban to force Subway, McDonald's, and other major chains to remove it. In-N-Out never used it. You bite into a double-double and the meat tastes like meat. The crust is real. The patty hits a flat-top grill and develops a brown sear. The cheese melts into the meat. The bun is toasted, not just heated. A double-double, fries, and a soda runs about $10. If In-N-Out is in driving distance, that is your fast food burger. If not, find a local burger joint that grinds its own beef and bakes its own buns. The model is not patented. It is just rare. You earned every dollar you handed over for that dinner. The 10 chains on this list did not earn what they took. Health inspections failed. Federal lawsuits filed. Bankruptcy filings stacked. Frozen meat sold next to fresh meat advertising. Mouse droppings in the cabinets where your dinner was stored. Ant spray stored next to the coffee creamer. Now you know what the receipts say. Share this video with someone who deserves the same warning. Subscribe to In Plain Bite and hit the bell. Every week we dig into the documented record the industry does not want you to see. The receipts, the lawsuits, the decisions that turn a casual dinner into a hospital trip. The next investigation is already on your screen. Click on it. Make your next purchase count. See you in the next one.